So I went looking for you-know-who, and what did I discover? Chantel, she's shooting the rapids in Quebec. Andrew's doing a shore lunch in Lake of the Woods, and Alan is sipping, well, who knows what, in Mexico. But not all of us are on holidays. Here in studio for a special Midsummer at Issue, Jennifer Ditchburn from the Ottawa Bureau of Canadian Press, pollster David Herle, Susan Delacourt from the Toronto Star's political team in Ottawa, and filling out tonight's roster, the designated hitter, communications guru, Jaime Watt. You know, I got to tell you, it seems to me for the past 30 years, the RCMP has always been in some form of crisis, one way or another. What are we to make of this rather remarkable week inside the RCMP? David, why don't you start us off?
Well, it's a little unclear to me, Peter. I think that one thing that is clear is that Mr. Elliott probably has some management issues. He seems to have acknowledged those, and they're probably exacerbating things. But the fundamental point is the one that you started with, which is that, you know, certainly by the time Mr. Harper took power, it was clear that at the end of Commissioner Zaccardelli's term that the RCMP needed reform and they needed change. What's unclear to me about this story is whether Mr. Elliott is a force for change that is being fought off by these people who are using all other explanations to fight him, or whether he's not the agent for change that is needed in there. And I think that's really up to the government to clear that up. Are they going to stand with him because he's an agent of change, or if he isn't an agent of change, are they going to move him? And
they're waiting on this review assessment, supposedly, that's going on inside the RCMP, although I hear today that they still haven't found somebody to actually do that review, which is interesting. Jennifer, what do you make of it?
Well, I think we should go back to when he was appointed, and at the time it was in the wake of a major report on what was wrong with the RCMP, and that was after the last commissioner, Zaccardelli, was there, and there was a big mess at the RCMP. So they put in Elliott, but they don't actually do much else. I mean, the report suggested they put in a management board to fix the problems. They didn't do any of that. So you still have some of those real systemic problems in the RCMP that never really went away. And I think what's also interesting in all this is that they're facing this year the possibility of unionization at the RCMP and also a new independent complaints review panel. So all of this is going on at the same time. And I think it speaks to a larger problem that has never been truly addressed by the government.
Well, I got to tell you, I'm still not sure what this is really all about. Is it resistance to reform or the pace of reform, or is it the management issues of the commissioner? What are you hearing?
Yeah, I'm not... I lean toward the fact that this is more than just a workplace problem thing. You know, first of all, I'm struck by an agency or a force that's supposed to be at arm's length from the government actually goes to the government and says help, because presumably the government got them into this mess, but by appointing a civilian. But it is kind of striking in the last few years, for me especially, to see how much interplay there is between the politicians and the RCMP. And David knows one all too well, the last election campaign, the announcement in the middle of it. But we can go farther back, you know, to budget leaks or all sorts of ways in which it's not clear what the RCMP's role is in politics. So I think what we've got here, just in the fact that it exploded onto the political stage, is something bigger than just a workplace issue. You know, I don't like my boss is not exactly news in Ottawa.
Jaime, you're the communications specialist. What's being communicated with this?
Well, first of all, I think the people that wrote that letter or wrote that memo knew exactly what they were doing in terms of communications. They were not neophytes, and for an organization that has
which letter are we talking about?
Not the Kumbaya letter, the first letter, the letter that started all this mess in the beginning.
About the concerns about his management style.
Exactly. Right. Now, here's an organization that has in its DNA respect for the chain of command. It's one of the most important things in an organization like the RCMP. So there was a triggering event or triggering events of some kind that allowed senior officers who knew exactly the consequences of what they were doing to write that kind of a letter. They knew that it would leak, and they knew the consequences of the leak. The real question is what was the trigger for that? And, you know, I find there's actually been too much talk about the RCMP being a special organization, too much talk about politics. I think we don't have to look to many of the major organizations in Canada and the kind of change that's taking place in workplaces everywhere that's very, very difficult for people. I think we had a leader that wasn't prepared to lead. I don't think it has anything to do with the fact he wasn't born and bred of the RCMP. It seems he couldn't lead.
Is he going to survive?
Well, I think someone asked the other day, can confidence be restored? Sure, confidence can, but trust can't. How can you look around that table and look at the people that wrote that letter behind its back and say, I'm going to trust you in that kind of an organization? So someone's got to go, either the people that wrote the letter or he's got to go. So I don't think he keeps his job at the end of the day.
Anybody thinks he keeps his job?
I think he might. And I said this sort of sarcastically on social media this week, but temper tantrums are not exactly a career-limiting trait in Ottawa these days. that we know that there's a certain prime minister who kicks some furniture. I find Ottawa, for all its talk of being new and open and all that, some of the old structures of the workplace are still there, and I haven't seen anybody get fired for throwing temper tantrums.
Census, the other big story that's not. How many days you've been writing this every day for 40 days, the census story? I got to ask, Jennifer, I understand the importance of it. I'm trying to understand whether it travels out there. Like, I haven't heard anybody talking about it on the street. Hey, you heard about the census issue? Yeah. I mean, is this a story that's having an impact, do you think, out there?
I think the jury's still out, and the polls that we've had were done too early, so we really don't know. But I think it's like prorogation. It started off sort of slow-moving, the sort of backlash against that. But as it went on for an inordinate amount of time, then people really started to hear about it and understand it. And that has the risk of happening with the census story, only because there's such a wide variety of groups that have come out against it. You've got municipalities, provinces, religious organizations, the Canadian Bar Association today. I mean, the list I have would scroll out across the studio. So when you consider how many organizations are upset about this, at some point there is a risk that it will penetrate into just their employees, the people who care about those issues. And the conservative strategy to this point of saying that they're all special interest groups, I think that won't hold water to a certain point. I mean, are the provinces a special interest group? Is the Canadian Jewish Congress and it's all its federations a special interest group? I guess you could argue yes, but at a certain point I think there will be a risk that this will penetrate into the general public. In the middle of July, maybe not.
What was the motivation here? Anybody understand why did they do this?
Well, I can't find any political rationale for it. I don't think there's anything strategic about it. I know that some people think that they're playing to their base, but there is no libertarian base in Canada. The Conservatives playing to a libertarian base is like the NDP playing to a Marxist-Leninist base. There is almost nobody out there who holds these views in Canada. So I think that this is dangerous. And I agree with you. Probably not many people in the summer are talking about it. But I think that the government, if it overlooks the fact that it has created an almost complete consensus among the policymakers, the commentators, the analysts of the country, that this is a wrong decision and born of a defect in Mr. Harper's approach to governance, that, Andre Pratt got close to saying he's unsuitable for government. Unsuitable for office, given that narrow ideological focus that he has. And I think it was a terrible mistake to reawaken that thought about himself.
Are you going to defend this?
No, I think it's weird. And I think that's actually the problem. And I actually think the big problem is, if there was a problem that this was meant to fix, Political Communications 101 tells us, we go and we explain what the problem is, and then we introduce the remedy. So all of a sudden, out of nowhere, when everyone even had heard of this thing before, thought about it or worried about it, we're out there charging for it, trying to solve it. And I think Canadians thought it was weird. And the reason that's risky, I agree with David, the reason that's risky is conservative governments, right-of-center governments, are always susceptible to the secret agenda charge. And so if that is one of your vulnerabilities, not your fault, just a definitional vulnerability, it's really important not to do things like this, because it actually adds fuel to a fire that was not burning. I think it's weird. That's the technical.
Do they kill it?
Sorry?
Do they backtrack?
I don't think it will, but I'd backtrack, of course. Yeah, absolutely.
I got to take a break here, but Susan, what do you...
There's a very strange part in Stockwell Day's letter to constituents this week where he says it's the government's job to protect you against the government. And you want to say, Mr. Day, you are part of the government. And there is sort of this piling up of things now. They're running against the institutions of Ottawa. And now the census is part of the institutions of Ottawa. A strange one to pick, because Ottawa has very little direct dealings with citizens. And the census is one of the only ones, besides your taxes. Most of the time you deal with the government, you deal with a municipality or a province. But that's the only, possibly cogent reason I can see is that they really want to take Ottawa out of people's lives, and this is the way to do it. Other than that, I agree with Jamie. It doesn't make any sense. Weird.
Okay, let's stop there, but just for a minute. But there's much more to come on this special Summer at Issue, including Whither Michael Ignatieff, and is there an election in the near future? We'll take a vote on that when we come back.